hear our fun conversation. So you'll need to enter your audio PIN if you're going to want to participate verbally in an audio discussion. So we'll be able to unmute people for that, but you'll need to enter the audio PIN. You can also use the chat function to chat in questions, and we'll be monitoring that. Any other housekeeping?
I don't think so. We want to make sure that Melissa, and I'm guessing James is with Melissa. I've unmuted you, Melissa, so if you've typed in your PIN, you should be able to speak, and the audience should be able to hear you.
And Emily Burgess is also here from Commerce. Do we want to do? I think we won't do introductions, but what we'll do is when we get to the discussion part, when you speak, just introduce yourself and say your name and what agency you're from, so we'll know. So we have a couple folks that have volunteered to speak on specific topics, and I think what we'll do is we'll just start that, and then we'll be able to have some Q&A and discussion around those topics. So the first one is Sandra Van Austin from Chelan Douglas counties has offered to share some information about sub-grantee monitoring, in particular developing risk assessments and monitoring plans. So this is an important topic for any of you that have sub-grantees or are thinking about it. Sandra, are you on the line?
She is on the line, but it looks like she hasn't entered her audio PIN, so we can't hear her.
So give me 1 minute, Sandra, to see if you can enter that audio PIN. If not, maybe we can switch the order of topics. So we need the audio PIN.
So for our presenters, we're waiting for you to get audio connection to the webinar so the group can hear you. And if you have something to show on screen, we can also make you a presenter, but you'll have to let us know.
No. Okay, still doesn't look like Sandra has an audio connection. So let's start with our second topic here, which is hearing from Melissa and James from Skagit Community Action Program about when they are monitoring their sub-grantees and looking to see if their sub-grantees are following the progressive engagement model, which is a CHG requirement. How do they know it when they see it? What does that look like? So it looks like, Melissa, you should be set up with audio. Are you there? Do we have any chat?
We have no chat. So, Melissa, can you send us a chat just so we can verify that you can hear us?
Sorry, folks, we're having a little bit trouble getting our speakers online with the audio, so hang tight. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, Sandra has. Melissa, can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Are you on a cell phone by any chance?
No.
Okay, you're coming through really scratchy. Sorry, we're having so much trouble with this. Let me try making you the presenter, Melissa. Do you have things to present? You do, Melissa?
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have any paperwork to share with the
Okay,
group.
you don't have any documents you need to share. You know, we are not hearing you well at all. I'm going to ask you to hang up the phone and then call that number on the GoToWebinar again, see if we can get a better connection.
Okay. Sorry, everyone, for all this problem. If it's been silent, that's because it's been silent. We haven't gotten our presenters online, and we've been having you on mute so you don't hear us cussing on our computer. We're getting Sandra Van Osten online right now to be a presenter, and she should be able to share her screen. She's got some materials to share with us about sub-grantee monitoring, risk assessment, and monitoring plans. Sandra, can you hear us? Can you speak?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yay!
All right, success.
Oh, great. So everyone else should be on mute right now, so we'll let Sandra present her materials, and then after that we can do some Q&A and some discussion. We'll be able to take people off mute one at a time. So I'm going to mute myself and hand it over to Sandra.
Okay, great. Well, good morning. I wanted to just share some information about the sub-grantee monitoring process that we use here in our counties, which is Chelan and Douglas. And I thought I'll just walk you through the major components of our process, and also I wanted to share some of the forms and checklists and tools that we use. We start off every grant term with a monitoring plan. And let me bring that up. It's whoops, I'm trying to minimize screens here. It's a pretty basic plan, and it just walks through the major aspects of the monitoring, our role, and I'll walk you through these other components, but how we train grantees, what our risk assessment process is, the different types of monitoring that we have, and right now my screen's freezing. desk monitoring, on-site monitoring. So we lay out when we would use that and what that would look like. We lay out our frequency and our schedule, and then we walk through the actual monitoring process for on-site visits and the monitoring, reporting, and corrective action. So that gets all laid out in our monitoring plan that we do every grant term. And so I'll just kind of walk you through in terms of our cycle what we do. We start off every grant term with a one-on-one grant orientation meeting with each of our sub-grantees, and we consider that part of our monitoring process. This is the checklist that we use, and so we try to just right out of the chute walk through everything with them that they need to do to meet the grant terms. So, everything from making sure the grant agreements are signed and that we go through all the contract terms and conditions. Invoicing. So normally with the meetings, we try to have the executive director and the program manager and their finance person there. So the invoicing section is especially important for them. So we, walk them through our invoicing process and what's allowable and any monthly HMIS reports that they need to include. We spent a lot of time with them on the documentation requirements, especially the client documentation. So we provide them with our sub-grantee policies and procedures, but also if, if they're an ESG grantee or CHG, we provide those guidelines as well. And that kind of gives you a sense of some of the things we walk through. And basically try to give them a packet in terms of client documentation with the forms and everything that they'll need for their specific program type. We also at that point go through the reporting and administrative requirements, so we try to get all the insurance certificates and audits and all that stuff up front, and also talk with them about their responsibilities with coordinated entry and the point in time count and annual reporting. And then we also go over HMIS and just make sure that they're good to go on that and that their programs are set up accurately, and if they need any additional licenses or new users to be set up. So we wrap up with that. And we started doing that a couple years ago, and I feel like that's probably the best thing we've incorporated because it really kind of sets the tone for the year, and at least people start to get a handle on especially the client documentation requirements. So I'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
Actually, there is a question from Katie Lindstrom, who is asking whether you would be willing to send Commerce the documents that you've shared so that we can send them out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can send that to you today. Okay.
If there's any other questions, go ahead and raise your hand on your GoToWebinar dashboard, and I'll unmute you, and you can speak.
Or you can type in the questions as well.
Or you can type in the questions. Yeah, good point.
I'm curious if this is similar to what other folks are doing, or is it very different? Do you have other comments about that?
Okay, any questions coming up?
Linda Greenway is asking, can we get copies of the materials you showed us? Yeah, I think we just actually addressed that, Linda. Melissa's going to send these to us, and we'll be able to distribute them to all the attendees of the webinar. So I guess in the absence of any more questions, we're going to, did you want to say something, Emily? Okay. Well, I think we'll transition over to Melissa and James.
Oh, I did have a couple other things. Hello?
Hey, back to you, Sandra.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I had just a couple other things to share. So we also have a risk assessment form that we use, and it's pretty standard. So at the start of every year, we do a risk assessment with each of our grantees, and it covers just, you know, the basic stuff of what might put them at a high or low risk. So we go through all of that, and at the end of this tool, they come up with a risk score. And they're either low risk or medium or high risk. So that kind of determines where we prioritize them in terms of any monitoring visits. In terms of our frequency and type of monitoring, all of our subgrantees that do housing services, so any of our emergency shelter, transitional, permanent, supportive, we just make a visit to them even if they have a low risk score. We just prioritize them lower in terms of when we visit them, but we try to get out and monitor everybody on site once a year. Our support services grantees, unless something unusual is going on or they get a high score, we normally do a desk assessment with them. And then in terms of the process, we normally 30 days ahead of time notify the grantees that will be coming, and we use a checklist. And this one is not updated for the 2016-2017 grant guidelines, so it reflects the old guidelines. But it's kind of a tool for us when we go out to guide us in terms of what we're looking for. But also we send this in advance to the grantees so they know specifically what we're going to be working with them on. So the first part of the form is pretty general, and then down here, depending on the type of program, there are certain sections of the form that would apply to them. So the form really covers all the requirements for all the different types of programs, but they just need to focus on their sections. So in our letter to them, we let them know that, you know, if you're a congregate facility, that's the old terminology from last year, but they'd only need to worry about sections A through E. So, and some of this is very general, and I do in advance. I mean, stuff like, are they okay on their invoicing? Do we have their insurance certificates? All that stuff that we can do ahead of time. And also the invoicing, I can assess ahead of time. And we also require at the start of every grant term that they submit their program policies and procedures to us. So we review those and make sure that they have everything that is needed per the guidelines. And then this is the section where it gets into specific program requirements. And normally, you know, I audit on site about 5 clients unless I see a problem going on. So this gives me a chance per file to mark whether they've included all the documentation they need. So we do that during the on-site visit, and then we follow up within 30 days with a monitoring report with specific corrective actions. So that's our basic process that we follow, and like I said, I'd be glad to send the documents out to you. And I don't know if anybody has any other questions.
Hi, Sandra. This is Stephanie Ryder at Commerce. Thank you so much for sharing. That looks like a really thorough process. And I had a question about, so you do the risk assessment, but then you said if they're providing their housing provider, you do an annual on-site visit, regardless if they're low risk or high risk. I was wondering if, when you did that visit, if you did this, if the monitoring was the same, if someone was high risk, would you be doing a more intensive on-site visit, or would you be looking at different things? If someone was low risk, would you still use your complete monitoring tool, or would you do some sort of lighter touch monitoring for those subgrantees?
Yeah, we usually use the tool, but we probably wouldn't go as in-depth, and especially if there was a certain risk area that we were concerned about, we'd definitely do more in-depth and potentially more client files we'd audit as well.
You use the tool as your base and you can make adjustments depending on the risk level.
Right, yeah.
Looks like we have an audience question.
Question from Melissa Taylor in Cowlitz County. Do you ask for program policies and procedures only related to the contract agreement? Many of our subs have extensive policies and procedures that include lots of other topics, so it's a lot of material if submitted as a document. do yours have freestanding policies and procedures related only to this contract? Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question, because I've definitely run into that depending on the agency. So we require their program policies and procedures, but there are some of our agencies where it's all kind of intermixed, so we do sometimes end up with a document that can be pretty lengthy and includes some of their larger agency and administrative policies.
Got it. Have you ever run into a situation where another funder has some policy requirements that conflict with CHG's policy requirements?
You know, the one that comes to mind is our domestic violence shelter, and I'm not sure if it was really conflicting. It was just an extra component of it that we had to work out, and you know, part of our discussion with that grantee was how can they meet the other requirement and our requirement and not have all this duplication. But that's really the only one I can think of off the top of my head.
Great. And Melissa responds, do you monitor domestic violence agencies if they have to black out lots of their data and can't share their assessments?
Yeah, the client files redacting a lot of the information.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, and we just try to work with them based on what they have available, and they, you know, cross-reference the client ID number with their client file. So I know what you mean. It makes the monitoring a little more challenging.
Right.
Other questions for Sandra? Either type them in or raise your hand. Sandra, do you have anything else to share?
No, I'll forward those documents over to you.
There's a hand. I think we have one.
Let's see. I'm gonna.
Question.
Hey, Cassie, you've been unmuted. Can we hear you?
Hey, yeah, this is Cassie from Grace Harbor. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to Sandra. This was one of the questions that kind of came out of our, for me anyway, that came out of our lead grantee training back in February. And these are exactly the type of tools that will be really helpful for us as we begin to build this infrastructure. We have, you know, done these pieces in the past, but it's been kind of informally and on a learn-as-we-go basis to make sure that we're covering all of the pieces that we need to cover to do our due diligence. And so to have some organization to that and make sure that we as the lead grantee and our sub-grantees understand the process and the tools and, you know, what is going to be happening and what the timeline is and what they can expect and what we can expect. It's just going to be very invaluable to us. So I just wanted to say thank you to Sandra.
Oh, well, thank you. I will definitely get that sent off. So, and Stephanie, should I send that to you or?
Sure, that's fine. You can send it to me, and we'll send it out to the group. And if you don't mind, Sandra, we'll just share your contact information with the group when we send out the materials in case people have specific follow-up questions. Would that be all right?
Oh, sure. Nope, that's good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Sandra. That was really helpful. And as Cassie pointed out, just right on topic of the reason we pulled this group together is to share that type of information. So we're going to transition now. I hope
we're going to make Melissa the presenter.
So we're going to make Melissa the presenter, and I hopefully you're with James and from Skagit Community Action to share about progressive engagement. And again, we're talking about sub-grantee monitoring, but more specifically, when you're doing sub-grantee monitoring, what are you looking for to know that they are following the progressive engagement model and meeting that requirement? And
Melissa, you are unmuted. We should be able to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Did you need to show anything on your screen, Melissa, or you'll just be talking?
No, we'll just be talking, and if there's any documents while we're talking that need to be sent out later, I can always get those over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. So just starting off, I'm Melissa Couture. I'm the Housing Program Manager here at Community Action in Skagit County. And I recently stepped into this role as of 2 weeks ago. Melissa Self has actually been the program manager here. So she has been more familiar with the sub-grantee monitoring. We'll mention that, but our focus is going to be on how we've identified progressive engagement and put it into practice. So James is going to go ahead and get started.
So my name is James Wittenhunt. I am an employee here at Community Action. Actually just accepted the housing or the rental assistance coordinator position. And so I just want to start off and kind of open it up with just acknowledging that we are there. We have to be able to identify when progressive engagement is being used, especially with our sub grantees when we're doing that monitoring. But in order to do that, we really need to know what progressive engagement looks like ourselves. So we just wanted to open it up and give a chance for people to maybe do a shout out saying, what does progressive engagement mean to you? What does that look like to you? And something brief, and if people want to, I don't know, if they can raise their hands and we can unmute them and have them just do shout outs on that, that'd be great, just for a couple of answers there, a couple of people.
Yeah, James, we're ready to do that as soon as we get an indicator that somebody has a question.
Okay. And if nobody has anything to say, we can definitely move on to continue on without that, and we can open it up at the end for people to talk a little bit more and have a discussion. So we'll give it another second. Well, we'll just go ahead and move on, and we can open it up at the end. Melissa?
Okay. So one of the things that we did when looking at the progressive engagement model was really break it down into what does that actually mean. So we actually looked at the definition of progressive and engagement and basically concluded that you're actively challenging the norm. So for example, with our housing interest pool, we're utilizing a vulnerability screening tool. And so while that tool is very helpful and it gauges the needs of the family, it essentially assigns a threshold number to a family to indicate how vulnerable they are. And we need to make sure that we're challenging that. So that number does not mean that that family is going to need intensive services right off the bat. So it's really being present with that family and recognizing that we have to put our assumptions aside as far as what the service is going to look like from the beginning, and then just being very present with them.
So what does that mean for us as an agency? We're really looking at how does that affect the services that we're providing, and again, these are things that we can look at, especially when we're looking at some of our sub-grantees and how we're seeing that they're using the progressive engagement model. One of the things that we've identified is that if we can use less resources to serve more people, not only is that going to affect greater change in our community, especially when we are dealing with people who are struggling with homelessness, but it also really addresses that, or really helps us to know that we are using those resources to resolve somebody's needs, which they're identifying. So one of the things that we, when we were going through this, we identified that we're here to acknowledge that people are resourceful, that they're able to access resources, and sometimes they just need a little bit of support in that they're capable of affecting their own situation, and that they know themselves the best. So when we are utilizing that progressive engagement model, we're really wanting to have them help facilitate the process of identifying the needs that they have based on the resources they have access to, and knowing what they need to get out of their situation. And what this does, at least for us, is that it allows us to really challenge the assumptions that we make about quote-unquote difficult clients, people who we are automatically assuming, maybe based on that vulnerability index score, that vulnerability score, that they are going to be hard to serve. because if we're going in with those assumptions, we really can't really serve them to the best of our ability and really recognize those strengths that they may have that are going to help in that process.
So oftentimes with progressive engagement, most of you probably heard providing a light touch to services and then progressing to a heavier touch. I think when it comes to sub-grantee monitoring, it would be very helpful to ensure that there's a correct tool to identify what the barriers the family are facing. So something similar to a stability plan. I know that we use a stability plan to gauge that. We want to make sure that we're identifying the strengths of a family when we first meet with them. Oftentimes families probably haven't been asked what they think their strengths are. So we're utilizing questions like scaling questions, for example. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you to obtain or maintain your housing? And seeing what they have to say about that, and then asking questions to get them engaged, and also how confident they are to sustain their housing. So those are the types of questions that we're asking, and I think when it comes to monitoring, we would want to make sure that others are asking similar questions to be consistently gauging where that family is and if more services are needed. We're trying to remember to be forward-thinking with our interactions with families and making sure that they recognize that we're not here to tell them what to do, that it's a collaboration between us and the family in determining what support looks like for them and what services would be best.
So we kind of just want to touch a little bit on heavier touch and really assessing when it's okay to or when it's necessary to provide that heavier touch, a little bit more intensive case management or financial assistance. One of the things there are a couple things that we do. First, we really heavily utilize the model of 3-month reviews. A lot of our programs do require that we are doing reviews every 3 months, but we have, instead of just using that for the programs that require it, we are adopting that across the board for all of our programs. And that really gives us a sense of, it really makes things consistent in terms of how we are assessing households and the frequency in which we're assessing the needs that they have. We also have set up a model where all of our case managers and our coordinator staff get together and we're able to discuss different household needs together, so that it's really a group effort. It's something where we're determining as a staff what the best service might look like for those specific families. Now, I think it's really important to note that this is not really a hard and fast rule, and we've been able to recognize that sometimes you can identify that a household might need those heavier touches at an earlier time. And one of the ways that you might do that is when you're meeting with a household or when you're meeting with a family and you're really figuring out what might be best for them, you don't necessarily have to stick, especially with the stability plans, you don't necessarily have to stick to that 3-month rule or that 3-month guideline. The frequency in which you do those may be different depending on the household's needs. And really, when you're talking about heavier touch, it may not necessarily mean that you're going to do a heavier touch both financially and in case management. It might be one or the other. So I think that one of the best things about the progressive engagement model is that it's so flexible. It's going to address the needs of a household individually. Every household is going to have different needs, and you're able to utilize that model to stretch your resources further, serve more families, and make sure that we are not really over-serving families. I think traditionally, in the past, with a lot of the models that we've used, you go into it with an assumption that maybe you're serving them for 24 months, and that's the goal. So instead of focusing on what's happening currently and the things that you're focusing on currently, you're really maybe over-serving somebody so that they are, it could be detrimental to that household.
We do have a question here.
So Monica from Kitsap County asks, if a family does not participate in the 3-month review, if like they actively avoid connecting with you, are there any consequences?
You understand that?
Yeah, I think what we would do in that situation and what we have done is to explore why that family is not wanting to connect. Is there something going on that they don't want to talk to us about? Oftentimes we'll do whatever we can to get a hold of them. So we'll go to their home if we need to and post a letter saying that we're trying to get a hold of them or send them something in the mail. Ultimately, I think that that is something that we require. So if that family, if we just couldn't reach that family, then yes, I think that service would end, but we would do everything we could to connect with them and find out why they are avoiding connecting with us.
And something like that, at least for me, from my perspective, it could be an indicator that they do need that heavier touch. Typically, at least in my experience, households don't just disappear off the grid unless there's something going on. And I think that with those initial assessments that we do and the process that we have in place, we really can identify when a household wants to be engaged in the program. Now, I think that another thing to mention about those reviews is there are some programs that require those recertifications, and the grant actually requires it. So if they're not able to fulfill that, just based on the grant guidelines, we may not be able to proceed. So it is important that we do what we can in order to make sure that we can connect with the family so that we can follow the grant guidelines, but also utilizing that as a resource for us to really create the ability to use progressive engagement a little bit more, making it consistent with those timelines.
Thank you, Melissa and James. Yes, sorry. This is Stephanie from Commerce, and I just wanted to check in there and kind of bring it back to the monitoring piece. So you've shared a lot of good information about how you're doing progressive engagement in your programs, and you mentioned when you're monitoring your subgrantees, you're looking at their assessment and their stability plan for evidence of progressive engagement. Are there other specific things you're looking at with your subgrantees to see if they're doing progressive engagement?
Well, I think one thing that you can do, and one way that you can really identify that is really look at how the budgeting is done with the grant itself. If you see that you're serving more people, but you are, for I guess lack of a better word, you're behind in your spending, so you haven't spent as much as you would expect, but you're serving more people, I think that could be an indicator that progressive engagement is being used. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is definitely being used, but I think that's just another indicator of an agency or a subgrantee using that progressive engagement model.
That would show you that they were serving a lot of clients with just a light touch of service?
Correct, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it wouldn't necessarily tell you if they're progressing clients that need more service.
It's just an indicator.
Yeah.
It's like a starting point for questions, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. I think like I had mentioned, I personally haven't done any subgrantee monitoring yet, but for me, I would really want to see the paperwork and the documents that are asking those questions and showing that people are consistently rechecking in with that family, because the situation changes so frequently, and I think having those constant check-ins to determine what the service should look like is really important. I think a lot of us get into the habit of checking in less frequently than maybe we should, or assuming that a family is doing okay when they're really not. So I think for me personally, that would be something that I would be looking for, some sort of tool or method to kind of gauge where the family is and how frequently that's being done.
Thanks, Melissa. Any other questions from the audience or comments? I guess I want to open up to the audience too on both of these topics regarding sub-grantee monitoring, what your own processes are for risk assessment and monitoring plans, and specifically regarding monitoring for progressive engagement. If anyone else wants to share what they do, if it's similar or different. We have about 14 minutes left, so we can have a little bit of a discussion. So just raise your hand or type in a question if you have something to share. Okay, so we don't see any questions or chats. So this is Stephanie again from Commerce with Emily and Jeff here, and we want to thank our presenters, Sandra and Melissa and James, for sharing that information, and all of you for coming and participating. This group is still emerging, and so we're open right now if anyone has any topics that they would like to either learn about or share about at next month's call. You can email us those if you think of them later, but if you have anything right now that you want to mention, a topic that you'd like to learn or share about relating to being the lead CHG in your in the community, you can raise your hand or type in that idea. I was looking for your hands raised. Or you can mull it over, and if you think of anything, you can email just any of us, you can just email your CHG program manager with your topics or questions. And we'll be on the lookout too if people are asking us questions and we think, hey, that would be a great topic to discuss with your peers. We'll put together an agenda for next month.
I think we're done.
All right.
Last call for questions or hand raising. Layla asked, do we know anything yet about additional CHG funds? Well, as a matter of fact, we do.
I'll email you today.
For those of you who have not heard, the word is out. We have the hard dollar amounts for your CHG contract amendments, and your Commerce Program Manager will be getting that information to you very soon, probably today. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks everybody for participating, and be on the lookout for a GoToWebinar invite for next month's call.
Thank you.